Access to Democracy is made possible thanks to the following organizations. Sheridan & Dulas, PA, a family and criminal defense law firm that has been serving clients in Dakota County and throughout Minnesota for over 40 years. Ranked a Tier 1 Best Law Firm by U.S. News and World Report every year since 2009. Sheridan & Dulas are here to help you in your most difficult life circumstances. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Distillery was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at their facility. If you're interested in learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check their website and plan a visit to tour their facility and taste their spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Hello and welcome to Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Steve Francisco. Thank you for joining us today. We have a return visitor to our program. I cannot think of a more timely interview than the one we are presenting today. Jason Viana is the CEO of the Open Door Pantry right here in Eagan, Minnesota. Jason, welcome back to Access to Democracy.
Steve, thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. So a couple of preliminaries real quick. People who don't know you, you're originally from Alabama. You came to Minnesota a long time ago. What brought you to Minnesota again?
Yes, originally from Alabama.
I don't hear a trace of a Southern accent.
If I'm talking to my family on the phone, it comes out, trust me. I came here 2008, but I came here because of my wife. Like a lot of Minnesota transplants, we married a Minnesotan and realized that's where we should be.
You chose well.
Yeah, I did.
And when did you join the Open Door?
I joined the Open Door 9 years ago. And before I worked as executive director, I'd volunteered. The church that I attend was one of the founding churches that started the organization, so I'd been involved before I actually worked there.
That's an interesting story that this food pantry began in a church basement, literally, right? And which church was it?
Well, Mount Calvary Lutheran Church at Eagan started what became the Open Door. Easter Lutheran, where I attend, soon joined the party because it became a thing that really hasn't stopped yet.
Mm-hmm. And you are today the largest food bank, I believe, south of the river?
I think Veep still has us by a little bit, but yeah, we're one of the largest hunger relief organizations in the state of Minnesota now.
So how many people do you serve on average per month?
On any given month, it's between 20 and 25,000 individuals, and that's right here in Dakota County. So we focus on the suburbs where there's just not a lot of support.
Mm-hmm. And people might be somewhat surprised to learn that there is hunger in the South Metro. Say a word about that. Why should people not be surprised by that?
Well, it's probably the most common conversation I have when I go out and speak to groups. It's how awesome I think the Open Door is and the amazing work we do, and a lot of it's about why do we have to do that work? Because in Eagan or in Lakeville or Farmington, a place where people don't think of poverty top of mind, that's why there's not a lot of resources in those places. I always tell people that there's give or take 80,000 people in Dakota County that can't meet their basic needs just from a revenue standpoint. There's almost 500,000 people in the county. So percentage-wise, there's less people that need help in Dakota County than there are in Hennepin and in Ramsey. But on the other side of that, if you're one of those 80,000 people, Steve, that need support, in Hennepin and Ramsey, our neighboring counties where people think more commonly of poverty, there's over 100 organizations that provide some level of food support. That's not enough, but that's a pretty good array. There's options. And if you look at Dakota County, there's 5. For the entire county, there are 5 organizations that do food support. And so when I talk about the Open Door and our growth, because it's, if we were like a small business, it'd be like a good growth stock. We started off as a closet in a church, and now we've grown to help 20, 25,000 people a month. I always remind folks, we haven't put any other food shelves out of business. We haven't taken anybody's corner. We've been expanding since the day we started to meet unmet need.
That's a great story. How much food did the Open Door distribute last year?
Almost 5 million pounds last year, and I think this year we're going to be over.
Right. Do you see a fluctuation in demand for food based on the time of year? Like, are there certain times of year where you see the demand declining or increasing?
You know, I think our demand's pretty steady. I think everybody that needs help needs more help around the holidays because there's so many additional opportunities for expense with family and gifts and wanting to take part. But the need is honestly, Steve, it's there all the time.
Jason, I'm hoping that we can knock down some myths about people who use food shelves.
Oh, I love this game.
Myth number one, true or false? The majority of people who use the open door food shelf are unemployed and not working.
Oh, that 100% false, and that's a very common, a common myth that folks have. And I think that, you know, for folks that haven't been in poverty or don't have a lot of relationships with folks that are struggling financially, it's easy to have a mental picture that doesn't align with reality. I think most people picture, you know, shopping carts and cardboard signs, and that's part of it, but what poverty looks like, especially in the suburbs, are usually families that are working one, maybe two jobs, would probably go to school with your kids, you just wouldn't realize it. It's a math problem for a lot of families.
That the income these people are earning is not sufficient
Right.
to pay all their bills and to put food on the table.
Right, and it's, yeah, you don't have to be in an abject situation just to need a little help making all the math work every month.
Myth number two, hunger in Minnesota is primarily an urban issue.
That's a really big myth, Steve, and it's something that I think some folks just like to tell themselves. Think about SNAP. That's in the news right now because of the
We're gonna
shutdown
be talking about that,
and the
right.
impact. I think a lot of folks just think SNAP is the group of people they don't want to help sometimes. But you know, 45% of folks that are on SNAP, Steve, they're in outstate Minnesota.
Right.
And if you want to talk about challenging food shelf dynamics, because the Open Door, we are one of, I don't know, almost 500 food shelves in the state of Minnesota. They come in different shapes and sizes. But if you're in outstate Minnesota, outside of the metro, the need is greater than they can meet.
And to get to the food shelf, people are most likely going to have to drive farther or have a friend or relative take them to that food shelf location, which may be 20, 30 miles away. If you live in Egan, hopefully you're not more than 5 or 6 miles away.
Right, and that's, you know, the Open Door, we have one of the largest mobile food programs in the state. We go to 36 different places around Dakota County because in the suburbs, transportation is a challenge.
Right.
But we've shared our playbook for mobile food with many food shelves in rural settings because it becomes a logistics problem. There is food, but how do you get it to folks that need it in a way that doesn't completely disrupt their lives?
Really important. So you're not just waiting for clients to come in the door, you're actually going out to where clients are.
100%. And half of our mobile sites are senior living facilities that are subsidized living places where folks have mobility issues or transportation issues and just don't have access to food. That problem that we see in the suburbs is present in rural Minnesota and is present in the metro. Hunger really is a non-discriminatory problem.
Today is October 31st, and literally in a few hours, with the federal government shut down, no budget in place, no appropriations in place, the SNAP program, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, is about to stop benefits to approximately, I believe I read 41 million Americans, and in Minnesota about 430,000 a month on average who receive SNAP benefits.
Yep.
How are you at the Open Door going to be addressing this crisis that is literally at the doorstep?
Well, we are going to be addressing it as aggressively as we can, but ultimately inefficiently or ineffectively. What we're going to do is going to be helpful to some, but not enough to close that gap. So SNAP is one of those things that if you really understood how it worked, SNAP, I joke with my legislators, it's a rare thing. It's an effective government program. Like, it's remarkably efficient. There's remarkably low fraud and abuse in SNAP because it's a pretty rigorous process to take part. But for every meal I can provide, SNAP can provide 9. It puts cash assistance directly in the hands of families that need it, and they can only spend it on food. The piece that some people miss, retailers, our grocery stores, our small businesses, they rely on EBT. I want to say, and I could have the number wrong, something like 12 to 15% of all transactions in retail establishments for food are SNAP purchases.
And we should say EBT is
Another word for SNAP. It's an electronic transaction.
benefit transaction.
Yep.
Right.
It's putting things on a card instead of handing people cash.
Right, right. And so as we face this situation, there are reports that the U.S. Department of Agriculture actually has a substantial amount of funds set aside that have already been appropriated by Congress, so they're not subject to the shutdown, but some amount of money that could, if the government chose to, the president and the Secretary of Agriculture presumably, could release those funds.
That's my understanding, but don't quote me on anything of how the federal government works. That's what I've read. That's what I've been told. I know that would not be out of line with current behavior of the administration.
They're saying it's not an emergency.
Right. Well, it may not be for them, but it is for the families in Minnesota that won't be able to put food on their table.
And a U.S. federal judge in Boston, I believe, this afternoon is hearing arguments about whether to intervene, that the judge may order the Department of Agriculture to release these funds. So that would not satisfy all of the demand for SNAP, but as I understand it from news reports, would perhaps satisfy a significant portion of the demand until Congress gets the government reopened.
And that would be tremendous. I think the challenge, Steve, for families that are reading that or someone that's watching this, it's really hard to know what to count on. And I think that when you're in crisis, you need to know, what can I know is going to happen? And right now, the uncertainty that's facing families is creating a level of anxiety in our pantry, on our phone lines that we haven't seen since the pandemic happened. People are just worried. And ultimately, if I took $200 out of your household budget every month,
feel it.
You'd feel it and you'd be worried about it. And so until it gets solved definitively and clearly, it's going to have impacts that go beyond people's tables.
You had a special visitor at the Open Door this week. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz came to the Open Door here in Eagan. Tell us what the governor announced when he was there.
Yes, the governor hosted a press conference at the Open Door to announce emergency support from the state. I'm not sure which fund it came from, but they're releasing $4 million in direct aid to food shelves, such as the Open Door, to help us help in this time of need. That's a welcome announcement by the governor. Those funds will be in the hands of food shelves in the next 10 business days, is my understanding, and that will absolutely help. But as he said in his press conference, it's still not enough to close the gap of what the federal government needs to get solved.
Right. And we should remember, too, this comes in the context of earlier this year, Congress passed what the president called the big, beautiful bill. Other people would beg to differ on that description, but that bill made substantial permanent cuts to the SNAP program as well.
Yes. And, that beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and some people, I think, appreciated it. The challenges that they've put forth in SNAP, they're just making it more difficult for families to qualify. They're creating more bureaucratic hurdles for folks. A myth that you didn't bring up is that, if you're a family that needs support, it's just easy. You just go out and get help. And I think that if you've not been a family that struggles, if you need support from the state or from the county, it almost becomes a part-time job. The harder you make help to get, the less people can do it. And I think what I read the bill as was a disincentivization of seeking assistance.
The Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families website, I took a look at it and had some very interesting data there. When we talk about who are the Minnesotans who are using SNAP benefits, they mention 152,000 children in Minnesota, 72,000 seniors, 52,000 adults with disabilities. These are the people that we're talking about who are the beneficiaries of the SNAP program, right? And they're the same people that are going to be showing up at the Open Door and other food shelves seeking assistance?
100%. I mean, these cuts, withholding these payments, absolutely impact the most vulnerable in our communities. And it's unnecessary, and the harm will be felt for some time.
Let's address one more myth that comes to mind too that I hear people talk about. Well, they're using SNAP benefits at restaurants and they're buying alcohol, they're buying beer and wine. Can you use SNAP benefits to buy alcohol, beer, and wine, and can you use it at restaurants?
No, you can't use SNAP for a lot of things. I think we wish folks could. You can't buy a prepared meal at Cub. If you go to Cub and you wanted to pick up a rotisserie chicken, can't use SNAP for that.
But you can buy a can of beans or corn or other
you can't
food.
buy feminine hygiene products. There's a lot of things you can't use SNAP for. It's actually pretty limiting, and it's a smart, effective program that helps families and it helps small businesses.
Let's talk about the importance of SNAP beyond just people who need food, because aren't there some important economic benefits to the SNAP program that go beyond just the individuals or families who may need the benefit? Say something about that.
Well, we had a roundtable recently hosted by the state to inform folks about SNAP and its impact. And we had the president of the Minnesota Grocers Association there, and he spoke at length about the impact this will have on all the retail establishments, not only the cost of doing their business, but their ability to employ folks. So it's, I think Ronald Reagan patented trickle-down economics, but SNAP really does have a trickle-down effect that helps more than the families. It helps businesses and the rest of the community. And think about this, Steve, if you have staff that are low-income workers that are coming to help any part of your business, and they show up and they're not fed, they're nervous, they're worried, that's not going to help your business run. That's not going to help our community run. It has tentacles that go a lot of places.
Right. Or if we have kids who aren't getting enough to eat at home, they're not going to be doing well in school, I would guess.
No.
But I had seen a figure that it's been widely quoted that for every dollar of SNAP benefits, it generates $1.50 of economic activity. We're talking about money that's spent in both urban and rural communities, right? Especially important maybe in some of those smaller towns in rural Minnesota.
Absolutely. Again, I mean, it's putting money into the community where it can continue to pay dividends. So yeah, I've read the same statistics, and I've never heard anyone refute it from either side of the aisle.
One figure I saw too was that in 2022-23, now this was of course during the height of the pandemic, that about $1.1 billion of SNAP benefits came to Minnesota. And that money not only fed people, but again, this economic boom that occurred for other businesses and communities across the state too. That should not be underestimated, and people probably don't think about that when they think about hunger relief such as SNAP.
Right, because I think people don't think a lot about hunger relief if you don't have to. And that's what our legislators are supposed to do, is understand the impact of the decisions they have to make, and all the constituencies that they have are impacted when these decisions seem like they're affecting one part of the population, but actually have a much broader impact.
Mm-hmm. Jason, a few years back, we remember hearing about the federal government surplus cheese program. It was actually a variety of surplus commodities that the Department of Agriculture had that were distributed to food shelves.
Yeah.
Is that program still in existence? Do you receive federal commodities?
Well, you talked earlier about this SNAP decision and funds that are already approved not being administered. That's already happened in this administration with TFAP, which is the Emergency Food Assistance Program. There are federal dollars that are used in hunger relief to pay farmers to, and maybe not cheese right now, but it's milk, it's eggs, it's produce. Those dollars have already been withheld. And our partners at Second Harvest, who serve almost all of Minnesota and western Wisconsin, they've reported 30 to 40 truckloads a week are the impact those cuts have already made on the food inventories that are available to food shelves like ours to give food to families in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you this question, which may seem like a charged question, but I think people need to understand this. Do you serve all people who come in the door? Do you serve people who may not necessarily be in this country in a legal immigration status? Or is it limited to only U.S. citizens or permanent residents?
That's a great question, Steve, and it's a question we get a lot. At the Open Door, we built our organization on two real simple concepts. One's dignity, and one is health. Nobody likes asking for help. So we've designed our programs at the Open Door to help anyone that comes to us in need of food support. We don't ask a lot of questions. We don't ask for identification. We make it easy for people to get help. We've already talked about the math in our community that there's not enough resources for the folks that we know can't make ends meet. So we don't put any extra hurdles up. And when we go out into the community with our mobile food program, we use our partners, we use data from the county, we use school social workers to help us identify the areas where the need is greatest. But of the things we're concerned with, anything about your identification is not something on our mind.
Related to this, I want to ask you about another myth. Thousands of Minnesotans who are undocumented and millions across the country who are in undocumented status are receiving SNAP benefits. True or false?
It's false. And again, I think most folks that hold that view have never applied for SNAP or don't know folks that have. SNAP is actually pretty challenging to qualify for. You've got to jump through some hurdles. It is not the open door. The open door, if you show up, wearing what you're wearing, I'm going to give you food.
Right.
You go to the SNAP office, it doesn't matter. You have to go through the process. It's effective, it's efficient, and if you are not here in a legal standing, you absolutely cannot get SNAP benefits.
Jason, tell our viewers about some of the corporations that the Open Door partners with, and frankly, other food shelves in Minnesota. Who are some of the corporations that you partner with who help meet this enormous demand for food at the food shelf?
Well, at the Open Door, again, we're here in Eagan, so our relationships are pretty local, but we have remarkable support from the corporate community. Some of our largest business supporters are financial institutions. Midwest Bank has been remarkably generous to our work. Think Mutual Bank. They support our effort to feed children in the summer at a really high level. Harrigan Distributions, which most people won't know because they're business-to-business flooring. They're a remarkable family-owned Eagan company who've helped us. Thomson Reuters has helped us. Land O'Lakes has helped us. And throughout hunger relief, whether it's at the Open Door or at Second Harvest, you'll find that Minnesota is just a remarkably generous corporate community. And it's harder to find organizations that don't help in some way than those that do.
Let's give our viewers an idea what's going to be happening at the Open Door over the next few days, and hopefully not weeks, but over the next few days as SNAP benefits expire. What is the Open Door doing in terms of changing how you distribute food? And what are you doing in terms of recruiting volunteers to help you?
Well, a couple things, Steve. Anytime more help is needed, like during the pandemic or like during the shutdown, our job is to find ways to do more. So we're not actually changing much of what we're currently doing, but we are going to do some additional. And so for us, we're going to open on Saturdays for what we call emergency shutdown support.
Beginning tomorrow,
Beginning
Saturday,
tomorrow
November
morning.
1st.
Saturday, November 1st, and every Saturday in November, we will be open. We will have a produce distribution that will be prepared to support 500 to 600 families. People will drive up, they'll walk into our warehouse, they'll help themselves to food, and they'll take it out. So it will not be enough to make all families whole, but at a time when more is needed, that's our job.
Jason, I love playing Mythbuster with you, so I have one last myth for you to bust for us today.
Okay.
Most of the food that the Open Door and other food shelves distributes is processed or canned food. Is that true or false?
Well, I can't speak for all food shelves.
Let's talk about the Open Door.
The Open Door, we were one of the first food shelves in the state to offer perishable food as an option.
Fruits, vegetables.
Right, meat, dairy, the things that people need to keep themselves healthy and the things that are the most expensive. And I mean, you learned in elementary school, you are what you eat. So we've always tried to provide that. Now about half the food shelves in the state focus on perishable foods and giving clients a choice. At the Open Door, 70% of what we offer is fresh or perishable.
That's really important. You talked earlier about the mobile food program, and did we mention drive-through too? You have a drive-through program?
We have a drive-through program. We have 5 different ways we make food available, and we just try to develop avenues that work for people's lives. And drive-through is one that we do. We did this afternoon. You can make an appointment and drive through and get a pre-packed box of produce and essentials. It's enough to help get you through the week until we can get to you next week.
And related to the issue of fresh, perishable foods, fruits, vegetables, etc., you have a program, Garden to Table.
Yes.
Tell us about Garden to Table. What is that?
The Garden to Table is a program where we help folks in our community that may live in an apartment or in a building. They don't have access to grow their own food. And we have 8 community gardens around Dakota County where we give people a plot, we give them seeds and plants and all the things they need to grow food so they have access to produce what they like for themselves.
Do you have people who help them do this, who know something about different types of things that they can grow?
We've got a lot of really well-intended volunteers and master gardeners out there that are able to help, but if I had to be real honest, I think YouTube is probably as helpful as anything.
Yeah. But that idea of having your own plot and being able to grow some of your own food that you and your family are going to eat, that's really an interesting concept.
It is. I mean, we are about removing barriers to fresh and healthy food for families. Because back to your myth of people that are struggling eat terribly. That's because that's what you can afford to eat if you don't have a lot of money. If you go into the grocery store, just go do a test, Steve. How much are shells and cheese and ramen? How much are Honeycrisp apples? They're not equally weighted. So through whatever the Open Door is doing, we're trying to make it easy for families to get the nutrition they need and the nutrition they tell us they prefer.
Right, and the same with protein, I would guess too, which we all need protein in our diet. You look at some of the proteins are very expensive right now when you talk about meat, certain types of meat or fish, or even eggs, although the price of eggs started to come down a little bit, but it had hit some big highs in recent times, primarily due, I believe, to the avian flu, I believe.
Well,
drove up egg prices, but that's starting to come down now, isn't it?
And Steve, you should have an economist on at some point to talk about the impact, the competition between wages and the cost of living. Because, since 2020, we've had some remarkable growth in wages, especially for the bottom quarter of the economy. The challenge is every time they creep up past inflation almost says, hold my beer, I'm going to come get you. And so the cost of housing, the cost of groceries, they just keep moving. And there's nothing else to leave your viewers with. It's really just a math problem. Most people that come to the Open Door or other sources of support, if you chat with them and ask them, do you want to come to a food shelf? They'll tell you they absolutely don't.
And many of them, I've seen interviews on TV where we now have people showing up at the Open Door and other food shelves. They're saying, I never went to a food shelf before. I never imagined I would be here. We are down to about a minute, and we have to get this in. Where can people go if they need food assistance? How do they get to the Open Door? Where are you located, or what number can they call, or what website can they visit?
The easiest way to get food from the Open Door is to go to our website. We have all of the options of all of the programs. If you're watching this and you're not in Dakota County, you're not in Egan, go to the Minnesota helpline from Hunger Solutions. Google Minnesota Food Help. It will get you. You can put your zip code in there and you can find all the food resources that are close to you.
And your website again is the opendoorpantry.org.
Nailed it.
Located right here in Egan. And also the same thing, go to the website if you are interested in perhaps becoming a volunteer.
Absolutely. Steve, we're a conduit for generosity. The more people that are good to us, the more people we're able to help.
That's really great. Jason Viana, CEO of the Open Door Pantry right here in Egan, thank you for being our guest today on Access to Democracy, and thank you for the great work you and your team of volunteers are doing to address hunger in our community.
Thanks for having me, Steve.